You know the exact moment it happened. You were sitting in the aftermath of a quiet betrayal. Someone you trusted, someone you invested your absolute loyalty into, just outplayed you, left you isolated, and watched you fall. Your pulse is racing. The air in the room feels impossibly heavy. Your immediate instinct is to strike back, to send the angry message, to demand an explanation, to force them to recognize your worth. But what if your anger is the exact mechanism they are relying on to finish you off? The world does not pity your collapse. It calculates how to exploit your remains. We're not here to heal your inner child, and we will not offer you generic comforts. We're here to execute a ruthless, structural reset. We're going to install a psychological operating system that renders you unassailable. To transition from a predictable victim of circumstance into an unpredictable architect of your own power, you must master the 6 laws of strategic restructuring. Let's begin. You lie awake in the suffocating quiet of the early morning, trapped in a relentless mental playback loop. You replay the exact moment you realized you were being managed, handled, and ultimately discarded. You feel the heat of humiliation in your chest, the sickening realization that while you were operating on loyalty, they were operating on leverage. You remember the subtle shifts in their tone, the sideways glances, the gradual way your influence was siphoned out of the room until you were left standing on the outside of an empire you helped build. You feel paralyzed by the sheer disrespect of it. You trusted them. You handed them the keys to your vulnerabilities, believing that shared history meant shared protection. That was your first catastrophic error. Modern society has built an entire industry around how you should handle this exact moment of devastation. The world whispers softly to you. It tells you that your pain is valid, that you need to take time to heal, that you must process your trauma and seek closure from those who wronged you. It offers you the soft, therapy-laced language of a victim. Reject it entirely. Healing is a passive concept designed to keep you sedated. It is a luxury for the weak, a comforting lie that smooths over the sharp edges of your failure, so you do not have to look at your own terrifying incompetence. If you accept their comfort, you accept their hierarchy. You are bleeding energy into the past, while your enemies are coldly securing the future. Strategy demands a radically different approach. Strategy demands that you do not heal from pain, but that you study it with the surgical detachment of a coroner performing an autopsy. Pain is not a tragedy. It is an audit. It is raw, unvarnished data, highlighting your tactical blindness and the exact locations where you misplaced your trust. This is the calculus of humiliation. Every ounce of disrespect you currently feel is simply the market adjusting to the true value of the leverage you surrendered. To understand the mechanics of this, we must look to a man who transformed absolute destruction into immortal power. In the winter of 1512, Niccolò Machiavelli lost everything. For over a decade, he had been a highly respected diplomat and architect of the Florentine Republic's military strategy. Then, the political winds shifted. The Medici family reclaimed power. Machiavelli was immediately stripped of his office, his status, and his livelihood. But the humiliation did not end with his dismissal. He was accused of conspiracy, thrown into a damp cell, and subjected to the strappado, a brutal form of torture where a man's hands are tied behind his back and he is dropped violently by his wrists, dislocating the shoulders and tearing the musculature. He was physically broken, publicly shamed, and banished to a rural farm in San Casciano, sentenced to live out his days in irrelevant exile. Machiavelli did not write poetry about his suffering. He did not demand an apology from the universe. He did not seek therapy for his trauma. He understood that the concept of fairness is an illusion sold to the powerless. Instead, he engaged in a ruthless structural restructuring. He sat in his exile, his body still aching from the torture, and he began to study the very men who had crushed him. He divorced his emotion from the event. He analyzed the Medici's ruthlessness, their use of deception, their manipulation of the masses. He extracted the data of his own downfall and weaponized it. The result was the Prince, the most dangerous, unassailable blueprint for power the world has ever known. He turned his exile into an empire of thought that has outlived his torturers by half a millennium. If you sit around mourning the unfairness of your situation, you cement your status as permanent prey. Injustice is merely a word used by the powerless to complain about the physics of power. You must step outside of your own ego. You must look at your own ruin with cold objectivity and ask the brutal questions. Who smiled when you fell? What specific piece of leverage did you freely hand to your betrayer? At what exact moment did your desire to be liked override your need to be respected? Where were you dangerously naive? Extract the metrics of your defeat. Map the exact anatomy of how you were outplayed. You must systematically separate the sting to your pride from the strategic lesson underneath it. This is the path to regaining control. You absorb the blow, you calculate the cost, and you rewrite your internal architecture so that you can never be breached in the exact same way again. Once you have extracted this data, the puzzle pieces of your betrayal will be laid out clearly on the table before you. And in that moment, a new, violent urge will rise in your chest. You will feel an overwhelming, burning desire to take this newfound clarity and confront the people who broke you. You will want to expose them, to show them that you finally see the truth, to demand the respect you are owed. That instinct is fatal.
You are staring at a glowing screen, or perhaps standing just outside the doorway of a boardroom. You have just been handed an insult, dressed up as feedback, or received a message that completely mischaracterizes your actions and disrespects your sacrifices. Your chest tightens. The sheer, suffocating injustice of it claws at your throat. So you react. You start drafting the response. You pace around the room, rehearsing an argument in your head, preparing the perfect, logical sequence of words that will finally make them see your value, understand your intentions, and realize their catastrophic error. You're desperate to clear your name. You want to prove that you are not the villain or the fool they have painted you to be. You believe that if you just explain yourself clearly enough, they will finally understand. Let me perform a psychological extraction on that belief right now. They understand perfectly. They just do not care. The modern world has programmed you with a lethal social vulnerability. It tells you that communication is the ultimate virtue. It begs you to speak your truth, to loudly declare your boundaries, to air out your grievances, and to be vulnerable so that you can be heard. This is a beautifully disguised trap, engineered by a society that wants you predictable. Society encourages you to speak your truth, not to heal you, but to map you. The moment you open your mouth to defend yourself against a calculated insult, you are handing your enemy the exact blueprint of your nervous system. You are showing them precisely what words make you bleed, What accusations make you panic? And what insecurities govern your actions? Think about the anatomy of the over-explainer. Picture the man who rushes to fill the silence, who justifies his decisions to people who have absolutely no authority over his life, who writes essays in comment sections or text threads defending his character. He vibrates with a frantic, desperate energy.
He signals one thing with absolute, undeniable clarity: low status. By arguing with the people who disrespected you, you are silently begging for their validation. You are asking the executioner for a performance review. It is pathetic, and your enemies know it. Every justification you offer, every angry defense you mount, is a piece of leverage hemorrhaging from your command. You are voluntarily surrendering psychological territory to people who have not earned the right to occupy your mind. You must immediately implement the law of information asymmetry. In any dynamic of power, the person who holds the most information while revealing the least controls the board. Silence is not the absence of speech. Silence is the deliberate, weaponized withholding of leverage. When you are attacked, marginalized, discarded, or insulted, and you respond with absolute, chilling stillness, you create a psychological void. Human beings are fundamentally terrified of voids. They rely on the friction of your reaction to know that their attack was successful. When they strike you and you do not flinch, when they provoke you and you offer no justification, their internal alarm systems trigger. They expected a reaction. You gave them a mirror. Suddenly the power dynamic inverses. They do not know what you know. They do not know if their attack worked or if you are quietly orchestrating their ruin. In their panic to fill the uncomfortable, suffocating silence you just created, they will start talking. They will over-explain. They will stumble, reveal their true motives, expose their insecurities, and show their hidden hands. You win the game simply by refusing to sit at the table. Speak only to conceal or to command, never to complain. But here is the brutal reality of stillness. You can clamp your jaw shut, you can refuse to send the text message, and you can walk away from the argument. But if your heart is pounding fiercely against your ribs, if your hands are shaking, and if your eyes are darting around the room looking for an escape, your silence is not a weapon. It is just a panicked freeze. You may have stopped the bleeding of external information, but the internal hemorrhage is destroying you. A fortified perimeter means absolutely nothing if the fortress is burning from the inside. You are sitting at a table, a conversation is happening, the atmosphere is normal, and then, suddenly, the energy shifts. Someone across from you drops a subtle jab. It is a backhanded compliment, a deliberate undermining of your authority or your competence, delivered with a smirk and cowardly framed as a joke. You feel the immediate physiological response. The heat rises in your neck. The sudden spike of adrenaline floods your system. Your heart hammers against your ribs. Your ego screams at you to defend your territory. You feel an overwhelming, almost suffocating pressure to strike back, to deploy a sharper insult, to prove in front of everyone watching that you cannot be spoken to that way. You are convinced that if you do not react aggressively, if you do not immediately match their disrespect with force, you will appear weak. You are entirely wrong. If you react aggressively, you prove that you are a puppet. Emotion is the most efficient string by which others control you. Anger makes you entirely predictable. Ego makes you endlessly exploitable. The people who provoke you do not actually care about the substance of the argument. They are not interested in a debate. They are testing your structural integrity. They are running a diagnostic on your nervous system to see if you can be manipulated. When you lash out, when you raise your voice, when you lose your emotional center, you are giving them exactly what they want. You are confirming that their words have the power to dictate your internal state. You are handing them the remote control to your mind. To understand the catastrophic cost of emotional reactivity, we must examine the modern arena of warfare, the corporate board coup. Picture a high-level executive walking into a standard strategy briefing. He sits down expecting to review quarterly metrics. Within 2 minutes, he realizes he has been ambushed. His colleagues have orchestrated a silent alignment behind his back. The CEO calmly announces that the executive's primary project, the one he has bled for, the one he built from nothing over the last 2 years, is being handed over to a bitter rival sitting directly across from him. The ambushers are watching the executive's face with razor-sharp focus. They need him to lose his temper. They are praying for him to yell, to slam his hand on the mahogany table, to accuse them of betrayal, or to storm out of the room. Why? Because an emotional outburst gives them the ultimate, undeniable justification to terminate him. It allows them to frame him as unstable, unprofessional, and unable to handle pressure. His anger hands them the moral high ground and validates their coup. But picture the executive who has mastered the leverage doctrine. He feels the knife twist. He feels the sting of betrayal from the men he trusted. But he does not detonate. He does not flinch. He nods slowly, takes a deliberate sip of ice water, looks his rival dead in the eye, and calmly says, "Noted. I will review the new parameters." He terrifies the room. He absorbed their kinetic energy and gave them absolutely nothing to use against him. The rival who expected a screaming match is left off balance, second-guessing his own victory. The CEO who expected a dramatic exit is suddenly unsure of what the executive knows. By denying them his anger, he denied them their triumph. He retained his power, kept his position on the board, and bought himself the time to orchestrate a lethal, calculated counterstrike on his own terms. A man governed by his reactions is a slave to anyone who knows how to provoke him. If a rival can make you angry with a single sentence, they own you. If a dismissive text message from someone who does not even respect you can ruin your entire day, you are not a sovereign individual. You are a psychological tenant in your own mind, paying rent to your enemies. You are outsourcing your emotional regulation to the people who actively wish to see you fail. You must completely dismantle this vulnerability. You must construct the architecture of apathy. Do not confuse this with numbness. Numbness is the defense mechanism of the traumatized. It is a deadening of the self to survive the pain. Apathy, strategic, calculated apathy, is the weapon of the elite. It is the conscious, surgical decision to deny your enemy the satisfaction of an impact. To build this architecture, you must introduce the pause. Between the stimulus of the insult and the execution of your response, there is a fraction of a second. Widen that gap. The pause is where your sovereignty lives. In that 1 second of suspended animation, you transition from a biological organism reacting to a threat into a strategic entity calculating an outcome. When the heat rises in your chest, do not let it reach your tongue. Observe your own anger as a separate, manageable object floating in the room. You are not your anger. Your anger is simply a dashboard indicator light warning you that your boundaries are being tested. Turn the alarm off, read the data it provided, and respond with cold, clinical precision. You feel everything, but you are controlled by nothing. When you master this, you become a terrifying presence. You become a man who can walk through the fire of disrespect and emerge completely unsinged. Once you have mastered your internal climate, you are silent, and you are emotionally impenetrable. But a fortified mind means absolutely nothing if you allow parasites into the courtyard. Now, you must purge your external environment of its liabilities. You are sitting in a room with men you have called friends for a decade. The conversation is familiar. The environment is comfortable, but beneath the surface, a quiet hemorrhage is taking place.
You share a recent victory, a calculated risk you took, a new level of discipline you've achieved, a vision you are quietly but aggressively building, and you feel the immediate, almost imperceptible shift in the room's atmospheric pressure. There is a fraction of a second of heavy, calculating silence, a forced, tight smile from across the table, a backhanded compliment masquerading as a joke, or perhaps a sudden, uninvited warning about the dangers of overextending yourself. You leave that room not feeling sharper or energized, but inexplicably drained. Your mental bandwidth has been siphoned. You feel a subtle, suffocating pressure to shrink your ambitions, to blunt your own edge, just to make the men around you feel secure in their stagnation. You are carrying the dead weight of their unfulfilled potential, and you mistake that burden for loyalty. This is the silent rot of the legacy friend. Society has installed a deeply flawed, highly romanticized social protocol within your mind. It tells you that loyalty is measured by tenure. It demands that you honor your day ones, anchoring you out of guilt to the people who knew you when you were weak, aimless, or broken. It begs you to drag them into your future simply because they occupied space in your past. But let me expose the hidden mechanism operating underneath this nostalgic trap. You do not merely share time with your inner circle. You absorb their internal architecture. You absorb their risk tolerance. You absorb their cowardice, their financial anxieties, their emotional fragility, and their exact psychological ceiling. This is the law of contagion. It is a cold, inescapable metric of human nature. Proximity dictates destiny. You cannot swim in polluted water and expect your mind to remain pristine.
Consider the two archetypes currently occupying space in your perimeter, draining your leverage day by day. The first is the flatterer. He celebrates your mediocrity as loudly as your greatness. He agrees with your worst impulses and validates your cheapest excuses. He is the man who tells you that you deserve a break, that you have worked hard enough, that your enemies are just haters, rather than acknowledging your own strategic failures. Flattery is not support. It is poison dressed as loyalty. The flatterer is an anchor keeping you safely in the harbor because he is terrified of navigating the open water himself. He feeds your ego only to starve your progress. He makes you feel like a king in a kingdom of dirt. The second, and far more lethal, is the silent saboteur. This is the man who smiles to your face but privately resents your elevation. His betrayal does not announce itself with a drawn sword. It moves in the shadows of your daily interactions. It operates through subtle undermining and the planting of micro-doubts. He is conveniently absent at the exact moment you need tactical support, but conveniently present the moment you stumble, ready to offer a sympathetic sigh and a gentle reminder that he told you so. The silent saboteur studies your momentum only to figure out how to disrupt it. He does not want to destroy you entirely. He just wants to keep you small enough so that his own lack of momentum remains justifiable in his own mind. Maintaining proximity to these individuals ensures your slow, invisible suffocation. The consequence of keeping the wrong circle is not a sudden, dramatic failure. It is a gradual, tragic settling. Their limited thinking seeps into your nervous system so quietly that you do not even notice it happening. Until one day, you look in the mirror and realize you have accepted a life, a status, and a level of disrespect you swore you would never tolerate. You surrendered your leverage to keep a social circle that was never worthy of your potential. You must conduct a clinical, ruthless audit of your proximity. The strategic mind evaluates relationships not through the lens of history, sentiment, or comfort, but through the lens of utility and mutual elevation. Does this person's presence make you sharper, Does their energy demand that you operate at your highest capacity? Does their honesty, even when it cuts to the bone, expose your blind spots and make you more dangerous? If the answer is no, you must excise them from your reality. You do not owe them a lengthy explanation. You do not owe them an apology. You do not owe them a gradual, polite phasing out. You must recognize that the version of you they were friends with, the version that was predictable, exploitable, and easily managed, no longer exists. That man is dead. You are engaging in strategic pruning. Cut the dead branches so the trunk can grow. Do it with cold, unapologetic precision. Once you have eliminated the energy vampires and the flatterers, you will experience a profound, shocking silence in your life. Do not panic. Do not rush to fill it with new noise. That emptiness is not loneliness. It is the newly cleared terrain of your psychological sovereignty. With your perimeter fully secured and the saboteurs removed from the courtyard, you are finally ready to advance. But your movement cannot be telegraphed. Now that your inner world is lethal, your external execution must remain entirely invisible. You just had a breakthrough. You finally see the path out of the suffocating mediocrity of your current position. You have conceptualized the architecture of a new business, a radical physical transformation, or a calculated exit strategy from a toxic environment that has been bleeding you dry. The excitement surges in your chest. The vision is so clear you can almost touch it. And what is your immediate, fatal instinct? You want to announce it. You want to pick up your phone, call the very people we just audited, and declare your intentions. You want to drop cryptic hints in conversations. You want to sit across from a colleague and casually let it slip that you are moving on to bigger things. You want them to look at you differently, to respect you more, before you have actually done a single piece of the work. Let me dissect this urge and expose exactly what it is. You are seeking premature validation. You are attempting to trade the cold, lethal power of execution for the cheap, synthetic dopamine of anticipation. This is the fastest, most efficient way to castrate your own potential. When you announce your plans, you immediately transition from a dangerous strategist into a cheap performer. You place yourself on a public stage and voluntarily hand the audience the right to critique a play you have not even written yet. You feel the chemical rush of their temporary attention, and your brain is tricked into feeling the satisfaction of an accomplishment that does not actually exist. But beneath that temporary high, there is a hidden, ruthless social rule regarding ambition. The world does not respect your unfulfilled potential. It actively resents it. When you tell a stagnant person that you are preparing to elevate, you do not inspire them. You threaten them. You hold up a blinding mirror to their own cowardice and inaction. Human nature dictates that instead of elevating themselves to match your new standard, they will instinctively attempt to drag you back down to theirs. By announcing your move, you hand them the exact timeline they need to prepare their defenses. You give the silent saboteurs the opportunity to manifest their secret envy into active sabotage. They will not attack you directly. They will offer realistic advice. They will ask probing questions perfectly designed to plant micro-doubts in your mind. They will subtly mock your ambition under the guise of protecting you from disappointment. And if you stumble, they will be right there to warmly, comfortably welcome you back to the bottom. You must completely abandon the stage and adopt the camouflage of intent. The men who rule this world do not announce their arrival. They do not seek permission, and they certainly do not ask for a round of applause for the blueprint. They build the infrastructure of their empires in absolute, terrifying secrecy. This is the mechanics of strategic attrition. While your peers are exhausting their energy talking, performing, and managing the opinions of others, you are conserving yours. You go completely dark. You starve the world of your data. Let the people who underestimate you continue to operate on outdated intelligence. Let them think you are still the same predictable, easily exploitable man you were last year. Their false sense of security is your greatest tactical advantage. You are letting them waste their ammunition on a ghost while you assemble an overwhelming force underground. Consider the physiological power of keeping a secret. When you hold a massive vision inside yourself and refuse to vent the pressure through speech, that pressure has only one avenue of escape: action. By keeping your mouth shut, you create a high-pressure kinetic engine. Every time your ego screams at you to brag, you force that energy down into the discipline of the work itself. You compress the coal. Think of the psychological impact of sudden, undeniable results.
A man who talks about what he is going to do is easily dismissed. He occupies the mental category of a dreamer. But a man who simply disappears into his discipline, who completely severs his need for external validation, and who works with relentless, quiet aggression. When he finally emerges, the result is jarring. It is a shock to the nervous system of everyone who knew him. He arrives without warning. His success is not an idea to be debated or critiqued. It is an undeniable, concrete reality that forces the world to immediately adjust its posture and respect him. There is no time for envy to plot against him, because the fortress is already built. By the time they realize the board has changed, they have already lost. But to maintain this level of absolute operational security, you must face a dark truth. You cannot simply put tape over your mouth and expect to stay quiet. The version of you that craved their applause, the version that needed to be seen as smart or ambitious before achieving anything, that man is a massive liability. To move in the shadows permanently, that identity must be eradicated.
The ultimate mechanism of becoming untouchable is not a morning routine. It is not a temporary mindset hack. It is the absolute, unflinching willingness to commit strategic identity death. The version of you that was broken, betrayed, outmaneuvered, or chronically underestimated must be left permanently in the ashes. You cannot carry him forward. Most men fail at this final, critical stage because they remain sentimentally attached to their own suffering. They desperately want to drag their wounded identity into the future so that one day, when they finally achieve power, they can demand an apology on his behalf. They want their former enemies to look at them and say, "I am sorry for what I did to you back then." This is a devastatingly weak, ego-driven fantasy. You do not demand apologies for a dead man. You construct a new, unassailable presence that the people who broke you cannot even recognize, let alone manipulate. When you master the calculus of humiliation, when you weaponize your stillness, when you architect your apathy, and when you ruthlessly purge your circle of saboteurs, you are not healing the old you. You are executing him. You are replacing him with a psychological structure built entirely of pure, cold leverage. Reinvention is not about finding a new personality. It is the permanent, structural restructuring of your baseline reality. You are systematically shedding an exploitable identity. The man who desperately needed external validation, the man who argued with fools to prove his worth, the man who bled his valuable energy into a past he could not change, he is gone. He was the heavy, necessary price you had to pay for the strategic intelligence you now possess. When you fully integrate these laws into your daily existence, a profound shift occurs in your internal operating system. You no longer navigate the world as a fragile victim trying to survive the wreckage of your circumstances. You navigate it as a cold, calculating predator who has painstakingly mapped the terrain. You do not fear betrayal because you no longer grant anyone the blind leverage required to betray you. You do not fear disrespect because you no longer require anyone's validation to maintain your high-status positioning. You become something the modern world has no safe category for, something it cannot predict, cannot manipulate, and absolutely cannot stop. You become an untouchable, asymmetric force of human nature. We have given you the hidden architecture,
The execution of this blueprint is entirely on you. If this briefing shifted your psychological baseline, if you recognize the undeniable necessity of these laws, subscribe to Leverage Doctrine. We do not offer comfort, and we do not deal in hope. The weak will endlessly seek shallow motivation. The dangerous seek mechanics. Decide exactly which one you are.